Welcome to episode 3 of Men of Tomorrow. This episode, I want to talk about rejection, and I want to talk about rejection as a boy and as a man. Kailash,
Hello.
by the way, we're driving in a Volvo. What's it called?
It's called the XC60 TA Black Edition. So it's one of the top of the range Volvos. It has an electric engine and also a petrol engine, and it is quick. It goes 0 to 104.4 seconds. The air suspension, it feels like you're gliding. It feels like you're on a cloud. It doesn't really feel like you're driving.
So that really worries me, the fact that it can go so fast. So that's number one. But number two is I'm grateful that it's a Volvo, because for me, when I was growing up, Volvos were the safest cars on the road. I don't know what the case is now, but I feel what I associate with Volvo is safety. One of the things I find is young boys really struggle with rejection. And when they get rejected, they get angry. Unfortunately, for a lot of women today, that rejection can result in abuse and ultimately death. What I know is that domestic abuse is a really bad issue right now in Australia. I don't know how many number of women have died this year, but whatever the case, one is too many. This is something that should not be happening in 2024. One of the things I really wanted to focus on with Kailash as a son is make sure that he knew how to be rejected.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing. One of the things you taught me was how to be comfortable with rejection. And the way you taught me this was, I think I was 12 years old, I started high school, and you told me, go out there, meet as many people as possible, and be totally okay if someone says no to you.
So when I was growing up, it wasn't encouraged to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and we turned that on its head. So Kailash, I think one of the most important things that you have to learn to become a man is about rejection. A lot of men fear rejection, but you and I talk about rejection a lot.
Yeah.
For me, rejection in business, because I'm getting rejected a lot. For you, I know in year 7, first time you went and got interested in girls, and we started to talk about what it means to be rejected. Can you share with me your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what I've learned from all of my experiences is that to get to one yes, you need 99 no's. So it's not really about taking one rejection to heart, but just realizing it's part of the process. And what I've realized from doing that or being rejected a lot is just not to take it personally and not to be angry if someone rejects you, be it in a professional or personal situation.
I think one of the things that we're struggling with right now is domestic abuse. And a lot of that is from men being rejected. I think one of the biggest skills that we need to teach our young men and our young boys is that it's okay to be rejected. It's okay to break up. Trying to control somebody is not affection. It's not intimacy. And really be comfortable with when somebody wants to leave you, when somebody wants to terminate the relationship, it's okay. Now, this is a huge issue in Australia, and I know it got very serious, but I can't tell you how many women have died right now, but the number is way too high. 1 is too high. So Kailash, we got quite a few questions about how do you talk to, especially teenage boys, who might be getting into a car with somebody who's not a great driver, or somebody that might have been drinking a little bit. How do you think about decisions? Because we've talked a lot about this.
It's quite fitting that we're in a Volvo today because the main concern for me is safety. How can I be safe with others, and how can I be safe first and foremost?
Don't look at me.
When I make decisions, I always think about, is this a situation where I will be safe in, or will I put myself in danger?
And how did you come across, where did you get that? Because that sounds good now, but heck, you're 21. Sometimes when you're 15 and 16, you're not making decisions on safety. You're making decisions on, hey, what's going to be the most fun?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think the way I learned was longboarding. So we longboard together. It's a lot of fun. But the one thing that can pretty much set you off course and lead to you having a couple of broken bones is one tiny pebble. So you may be having the most fun in your life, but something so small can change the trajectory of your life. And I think from that decision, I've realized that that still works in any case. You might be having fun with mates, you might be in a car together, and then someone just does something and they're not paying attention, and it could lead to all of you guys being in a fatal accident.
For parents, I think one of our biggest fears is when you didn't have your license, I was kind of comfortable with driving you everywhere because I was in control. When you used to go out with your friends in a big group, I used to get really scared. Will you speed? Will you drink? By the way, it's still there with me now. What we do know is one of the most riskiest things that a young man can do is get into a car, number one. Number two, get into a car with mates. Get into a car with mates that have been drinking alcohol. That's 3 strikes and you're out. How would you talk to parents? How would you talk to young people to make sure don't do something dumb, but you can't tell them that they're dumb because at that time they're not thinking.
That's a tough question. There's a lot of peer pressure. Like if 5 of your boys are going into a car, chances are you would want to as well. What I've realized, and I'm grateful to have a lot of mates that are very intelligent and don't make dumb decisions, is that we always think about, if we do this, what is the percentage or what is the chance that something goes wrong? And if it's more than 1 or 2% or more than the average of getting into a car, which is also a very dangerous thing to do, then we shouldn't do it. So if one of us have had one too many, we always drop them home. And that's always been one of our priorities.
That's great advice. One of the things that I would share with parents is there's two parts of the brain. One part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, and the other one is your limbic system, and that, or some people call that your reptilian brain, your emotional center. What the research shows is the connection between your limbic brain and your prefrontal cortex only happens for boys at the age of 24. What? And 22 for girls. That connection between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex is vital because that's how you make logical decisions. When you see a teenage boy not making logical decision, it's kind of okay because that part of the brain's not wired up. We talk about parents as friends, but also parents as mentors. I think I've come down hard on you when you've made really dumb emotional decisions. I've tried to not judge you too much because that part of your brain just hasn't wired up.
Yep, totally agree. Now let's go into the second question.
So one of the questions we get asked quite often is, how do we talk to young men about expectations of being a man in this society? It's kind of hard because we're trying to figure out, what does masculinity mean? We hear the word toxic masculinity. We hear all these things that are wrong with masculine men. And it's confusing. Kailash, what do you think about this? Is it confusing for you? Where do you get guidance? Who do you go to? What do you look at? What do you read?
That's an interesting question. A book that I love reading about this topic is The Way of the Superior Man by David Deere. And he talks about this idea that to be a man is to protect and serve your loved ones and make sure that they are comfortable.
So we've had some great feedback from the men of tomorrow, especially from parents of young boys and young men, about their relationship with alcohol. The relationship with alcohol has changed quite dramatically from when I was growing up to when Kailash is growing up. One of the big things is non-alcoholic drinks, and I find that quite bizarre. Kailash, what do you think?
Last year I had 200 days of not drinking, and I've tried a lot of the non-alcoholic drinks. I tried Heaps Normal, which is good. I've tried Heineken's Zero Beer, which is actually quite good. I really enjoyed that. And then there's a Gordon's non-alcoholic gin, which just tasted like lime water. So I wasn't too happy with buying that one.
So do you find that people's relationship with alcohol changed or is changing compared to my generation versus your generation?
I think it's changing, but there are still people who love to drink for the sake of getting drunk. But I think there's a lot of people prioritizing their health now and understanding the impacts that drinking alcohol can have on them. Personally, when I play OzTag or when I play sport, if I'm drinking even one the night before, I can feel that when I'm trying to sprint for the ball or sprint to have a try.
So one of the distinctions that we've talked about as you've grown up is the distinction between an addict and a connoisseur. Can I ask you, how's that played out in your life?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people drink for the sake of getting drunk. And I have a couple of friends who like drinking. And what I mean by that is that they like trying out different alcohol. They like trying the different flavor, the different notes. I think the biggest difference between an addict and a connoisseur is, do you let the alcohol control you, or do you control how much you can drink?
Ooh, I like that. I like it from the perspective of need. Do you need the alcohol or do you enjoy the alcohol? I know some of my friends really enjoy it. They understand the nuances of their wines, whether it's got a peach note. I can't smell peaches in wine anyhow, but they really enjoy that moment of it. An addict, I think, is running away from a feeling, and that's why they imbibe alcohol, to make sure that they don't feel something, or they use it, they need it, while a connoisseur really enjoys it. One of the things that really resonated with me is what my dad said. And my dad actually used to smoke, and I never took up smoking. And it's because of this one thing he said. And he said, if you never try it, you'll never miss it. And I love that. So one of the reasons why I never started smoking is I thought, if I start smoking, I might miss it. And I don't want to start that. Kailash, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's been a really interesting phrase or framework to have in my head when trying new things. I think it's really important to experiment in life, but also that everything you do can have a consequence. And just having that framework in your head is like, how much more satisfaction or value will adding that thing in my life bring? And most of the time, it's probably not a lot.
I like it. So I think if you're talking to your kids about alcohol, drugs, a couple of things to remember. Number one is the distinction between addict and connoisseur. The more you demonize something, the more attractive it becomes, especially for young people that want to rebel. Number two is be quite authentic around it. It is quite seductive. The alcohol, the different substances that you can abuse, just saying no actually creates more of an attraction towards it. I hope this helps. Thank you.
So I think a topic of conversation we talk about a lot is what it means to be a man. But I think what is so important is what makes a holistic man. A lot of the times you may be good at business, you may be good at domestic tasks, but what's so important is to be good at both, to be good at absolutely everything. And that's really challenging in the world where there are so much things you can do and so many things you need to focus on. What's your thoughts on how to become a holistic man?
I'm just hoping that you're going to wash up the dishes from now on and pack the dishwasher. Boom! I'm kidding. This is why do you do a podcast? So you can get your son to actually do more work around the house, like vacuuming, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Anyway, here's the deal. Holistic man. Wow. We never talked about this stuff. I never talked about this stuff with my dad. I never thought about it. I didn't hear the word toxic masculinity. I didn't really think about what it means to be a man. I just had some ideas in my head, and then kind of Luke Skywalker was kind of my man that I wanted to build. I wanted to have a lightsaber. Another story. I think the three things that I find that's really important, that I've seen time and time again, that makes a real difference is these three things. And number one is humility. Number two is vulnerability. And number three is authenticity. And I've stumbled upon these three words and thinking about them as a real foundation for masculinity. And it's really helped me come to grips with some of the challenges I've had in my life. Kailash, what are your thoughts around humility?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. It's really easy to be humble when things are going terribly wrong. It's really challenging to be humble when things are going right. And we were just talking earlier just about the seasons of life. Sometimes you're in a summer, everything is going amazing. And then sometimes you're in the midst of winter and it feels like nothing is going right. And what's really helped throughout this whole time is having a quote that guides me, which is "This too shall pass." So knowing that the good times will never last and the bad times will never stay. And just through that, I think it's allowed me to become more humble because I'm aware of everything is just a season of life.
Wow. I love that. I love that quote, "This too shall pass." So what I think is humility can be so powerful, and I've seen this especially in my working life, is that those people that have humility are coachable and that they learn new things. If you give them a book, they'll read it. If you say, hey, listen to this podcast, they'll listen to it. They're not gullible, but they're humble enough to try something on that will challenge their mindset. I think that's really important for me as a parent. It's been really important for me as a husband. I know I struggle with certain things and my wife has asked me to take things on and I haven't. But when I've been humble enough to say, hey, I need to read this, I need to listen to it. So when I've actually done it and I've listened to her, I've actually learned so much more about myself and how to be a better husband, a better father, and just a better human being. The second point I find is vulnerability. Those people that can show vulnerability, that can really open up to other people, they're the ones that, funnily enough, are more resilient. And I know you and I have tried to be vulnerable to one another. And it's hard. It's hard as a dad because the model of fatherhood that I had is stiff upper lip, make sure that your kids think that everything is right. How have you found playing with vulnerability for both of us?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing you've done is you've never hid the bad times in life, be it mom in hospital or the business not going well. You've openly told us about it. And it's allowed us to understand who you were and the challenging times you were going through. One of these quotes that I read the other day that really changed my perspective of things is that it's the first time that your parents have gone through life as well. So you're trying to figure it out as well as raising us. And I think your 30s are still a development time in your life. So it was just good to understand that you were a human and it was okay that you went through those same emotions that were challenging.
So one of the things I've loved is that when you've gone through challenging times, you've told me. And I hear from a lot of parents that they don't know what's happening in their kids' life. How come we've got that? How come you feel comfortable telling me stuff?
I think it's because we have a very similar life in a way. Like, we leave the house at the same time at 7 o'clock, and we normally get home really late. And when we come home, we've got maybe one success and a lot of things that didn't go right. So having that shared common interest is important. But I think if we didn't have that, we both sort of set up a time every week or every couple of days just to chat about what's going on, because we both understand that it is challenging to connect with someone at all times.
The last one for me is authenticity. And I have to admit, I've struggled with authenticity. I learned about authenticity late in my life. I would say that I was very inauthentic for most of my life. I was trying to put on this mask. When I came to Australia, being an Indian wasn't a cool thing. I used to get beaten up for being brown. So I always tried to be something that I wasn't. In my corporate life and also in my personal life, I had this mask on. One of the things I've found is being authentic can actually make you more resilient. It can make you more powerful. But I didn't have the skills to be authentic. Kailash, what are your thoughts about authenticity, about being your true self?
Yeah, there was something I posted on Instagram the other day about something I wrote in my notes app about how I thought being harsh, being blunt, being firm would be an advantage in order to get ahead. What I've realized, however, is it's quite the opposite. I've found that being flexible, allowing myself to be my true self, which is a person who talks way too much, a person who loves dogs and gets distracted by dogs, even if I'm talking to other people, and having a high-pitched laugh is important to being myself. What I've figured out is that when I've been my true self, it's allowed me to have some amazing people around me, be it friends, be it with relationships and family.
So one of the distinctions I think about a lot is the distinction between honesty and authentic. My dad was incredibly honest. He was the most honest person I've ever met. And someone said to ask him, how are you going? He'd say, yeah, I'm fine, stiff upper lip. But then when I talked to my mom, I'd ask her, how's dad going? And she'd say, look, since he retired, he's struggling a little bit. His health is not as what it used to be. And for me, being authentic is about sharing how I feel about things. But that didn't come easy to me. What about you?
I think the more you get to your true self, the easier it is to express yourself. So if you are living a life where you're trying to be someone else, it's very challenging to express yourself because you're unsure of who you really are. And it's very easy to lose yourself in the process.
I think that's really important. I think finding your authentic self, you're less likely to get a bunch of friends that can really see the real you, and you're not doing stuff just because your peers are doing it. What do you think?
I think that's totally correct.
I hope this helps. Really, really grateful that you tuned in for this podcast. On that note, stay joyful.
See you guys.
Bye.